This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Mitliff. I'm so excited to be here today. We have Joe Shake from ProCFO Partners, who's a genius, as you know. And Ashley Miller is the owner at Abbottstown Industries. And I'm going to let the two of you kind of introduce each other and the concepts together and the business that you do together. And I'm going to listen in. I'm going to come back because I know that I'll have my own thoughts and questions. But Joe, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to enjoy this conversation with you and Ashley.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. So Ashley and I got together through Ashley is part of a Vistage group, and within her Vistage group, they kind of encouraged her to say, you know what, you really probably need some help more from a financial standpoint. Have you ever thought of fractional CFO and going down that path? She did some research, from what I understand, of looking into that. Had a couple of different options, ProCFO being one of them. And we were very fortunate as ProCFO, very fortunate for me, for sure, to be selected as that fractional CFO for her. I am very grateful for the opportunity from ProCFO, grateful for sure from Ashley of the opportunity to get to know her as well as I have in this past year, and actually working with her and learning from her as much as I hope she's learning from me. So that kind of is the quick and dirty introduction of it, of how we got together. And so what I wanted, a couple of questions, Ashley, for you, and kind of pipe in for sure as we go through. One of the things that I would say that I have a question for you is, obviously, as I mentioned, that you were encouraged by Vistage to say, find somebody, find some help somewhere. And you took that to heart from the standpoint, yeah, definitely, you're right, I want to do that. And then what made you, out of the different options that you investigated, what made you choose ProCFO? And within ProCFO, what made you agree to me?
Well, it's funny, you kind of stole my story about the Vistage connection, not only between me and ProCFO, but then also between me and you, which I'll touch on in a minute. But yeah, so when I took this to my Vistage triad, so it was just a couple of people in that particular conversation, my Vistage chair immediately put me on the phone with somebody, and I ended up talking with the founder and CEO of ProCFO right then and there, which was pretty impactful, right? To have the Nelson on the phone telling me all the different things that he could help me with and all of that. So as I got into the process of looking for some financial help, immediately ProCFO kind of had a leg up, if you will, because they were, completely seemed very accessible. Which was wonderful. And then I think on top of that, as I did investigate, I did look into several different avenues to address the financial concerns that I had. Again, ProCFO really stood out as they do have a broad network of CFOs and resources. So that was extremely important to me. And it felt, as I was comparing things, it really felt like a personal and catered experience. It felt like it was going to be, some of the companies kind of gave me just a standard list of deliverables, which is great on some side of things. But when I'm talking to ProCFO and to you, it really felt more of a, what do you need from us? And it didn't have to fit into this nice little box tied up with a bow. It could be very personal. So that was important. And then specific to you, Joe, naturally, your bubbly personality. But on top of that, what made you appealing was you and I have a connection to Vistage as well, because you were a Vistage chair.
Correct.
So you're familiar with, the program, the organization, and a lot of things that we focus on through that. So and Nelson is too, I believe. So immediately there was definitely, that was an appealing aspect of it. In addition to that, Joe works inside of the same ERP, or a very similar ERP that we use. And that is definitely a challenge that we have really struggled with. And we run all of our finances through that ERP. So it was definitely important to me that there was that a little bit of a knowledge base there. And the other thing that I think really really was attractive about you, Joe, is that you had worked in the business turnaround space. And while I don't think that my business needed a complete turnaround, it did feel really important to me that you had that ability and that knowledge and that experience, that if we did find out when we dug into the financials that we were in a really bad place, that you would be able to get us out.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the compliments. And you kind of bring up a good point, because I will share, when I first met you and came on site in that first week to go through things, I would say my observation was very much of what you had just stated. You didn't need, say, business turnaround, but what you lacked, I'll say, was some of the tools to help you improve. For example, a cash forecast. Okay. And what I loved about you and Abbottstown was how quickly you adapted to the tools that I was trying to provide. It was enlightening to me to work with a company that was so ready and willing to say, I'm in, show me something more. And your team within your office is incredible. You have an amazing team within your office from the standpoint of, while they are not accountants per se, they didn't shy away from wanting to understand what I was asking them to do, where they weren't afraid of it. They were encouraged by it. They asked the right questions, and they still do. And I think to the benefit of you and the team that you've built is that not one person in your team is afraid of anything. You're ready to say, I'm in, help me. And the fact that you don't shy away from asking questions is why the sky's the limit of what Abbottstown can do. I have found in my experience that the struggle that a lot of companies have is they feel too arrogant within themselves, say, this is my business. I understand it. I know it better than you. Don't tell me what I know, what I'm supposed to do. And their businesses fail because of it. When you're not afraid to ask and have the conversation just as we are now, that conversation means everything. Ashley, if you recall, when we first went down the path in that first 3 months thereabouts, you were struggling from the standpoint of feeling like, why are we not moving fast enough? Mm-hmm. Why is it not getting to what you thought you were going to get? And you had a conversation with Nelson and shared with him, which was the right thing to do, share with him your concerns. You were not criticizing me or anything as a fractional CFO. You were just saying, why are we not moving fast enough? Why am I still not getting what I'd hoped to get out of this? And that's when Nelson had shared with you of my actual background of the business turnaround. And from my understanding of that conversation, he pointed out to you to say, okay, if that's what you're looking for, be prepared. You're going to see a side of Joe that you may not like. And I think you guys termed it as Mean Joe.
Yeah.
And so the funny thing is that has stuck. And here we are 9 months later. And while I like to keep Mean Joe locked in a cage and not coming out, you and occasionally will come back and say to me, please let Mean Joe out of his cage, because that's who I need right now.
Yeah.
And while we can laugh about that, it's the truth. It's what has helped both of us from the standpoint of you're forthcoming to say, this is what I need and how I need it done. Let somebody come out and be rough on me, or let somebody come out and be rough on the team. I don't care. It's what we need. And that has helped, I think, both of us. And so share with me what your thoughts are on that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So like two parts of that. First of all, I appreciated from ProCFO immediate response, again, directly from Nelson, who is connected to my Vistage chair. And he's like, well, what are you not getting? What do you need? And so we had a pretty open and honest conversation. And certainly, like you said, Joe, it was nothing against you. Part of it was certainly an expectation that maybe I had that was inaccurate, but it made me sit back and reflect and say, okay, maybe I'm not getting what I need because I'm not asking for it. And again, ProCFO that had they handled that situation very well. We kind of circled back, and then we got on on the right trajectory for, again, like what I was looking for, and sort of expecting that personal catered experience. So that piece of it was a great experience, because it wasn't all rainbows from the beginning. We had to work and understand what we both wanted and how it was going to work. And then yes, I love Mean Joe. And Nelson was a little bit like, that's interesting, because normally I have to settle Joe down. I was like, it's not the case here. We need Mean Joe. And again, both with ProCFO and again with Vistage, part of what I like about both of those organizations is accountability. So I need to be held accountable just like you need to be held accountable. And every now and then, me and Joe will say, Ashley, I asked you to do this 3 weeks ago. We really need to get this done. And I need, and I appreciate that. And again, it's just sort of setting those boundaries and expectations, which has been an excellent and awesome experience.
Thank you for that. And like I said, I think that's really been the biggest strength. And one of the strengths that I will say that I have found within ProCFO, of the reason why, even for me personally, why did I join ProCFO? What forced me to change from my business turnaround consulting to say, all right, let me try something different, utilize my accounting experience in a different way as a fractional CFO. One of the things that ProCFO to me brings to the table is the fact that we have, roughly 60 CFOs now across the country. It is amazing of how there is not one thing that I have come up with yet that if I do not reach out to a massive email, 60 ProCFOs across the country to say, hey, I'm having this issue with my client. Has anybody experienced this already? Does anybody have any suggestions or things that we could try differently? And I've done that in a few situations with Abbottstown, based on the things that you and I have talked about with respect to inventory and so forth for you. And it's amazing. I've always had an answer. I have always had somebody from ProCFO come back and say, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Having conversations. And I love that of ProCFO, of the fact that we do have that type of a network and that type of a resource to help our clients. And obviously you are bringing up the same point to you, that you're seeing that as well. So I just something I think that's helped you and I both from the standpoint, and along the way, it's helping Abbottstown.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's great just to get a third party opinion, right? So like,
for sure.
Something Joe and I have experienced is we don't have a financial department per se, but we have an accountant that we have worked with for many years. And some of the accounting practices that we do are a little, at least for me, confusing. Joe can probably attest to that. I mean, we're getting them untangled, but sometimes when I'm getting one thing that I'm being told by my accountant and then something different that I'm being told by Joe, I'm kind of like, okay, guys, like, let's settle this debate. And ProCFO has been excellent in that, and just bringing in an additional person or two to say, okay, I see what you're doing, but the best practices are these. And being able to sort through some of those things, certainly me as not being a financially, I didn't major in finance or anything like that. So it's been extremely helpful. And then it really builds the confidence that we're making the right choices along the way.
Excellent. So that's, like I said, really and truly, I appreciate the conversation, because this is what I was hoping to gain out of it, was just for me to get a better understanding of how your thoughts were when we got connected, your thoughts of how we have progressed to get to where we are now, and even looking at it from the standpoint of what's ahead. I think we have a tremendous opportunity still ahead for both of us from the standpoint of things that we want to still change. As you talked about with respect to still having some connections with your accountant and their beliefs and my beliefs, not that hers are wrong versus mine being right or anything else. It's say, what is in the best interest of Abbottstown? And how are we going to get Abbottstown to get in that direction so that you as an owner can truly look at a financial statement and say, oh, wow, okay, I'm in great shape. I understand all of this. When you're looking at something and you don't understand the line item to it, then that means, in my opinion, that means that whether it be me or anybody else, the accountant failed. Okay, the owner should have a true understanding of each of the line items. They don't need to be an accountant, but they need to understand the financial statement. And they need to understand, okay, I'm struggling here or I'm doing great here. And when you can do that without having a financial person literally tell it to you, the sky's the limit. And I think we're getting there. I think it's going to be great to see what is ahead for everyone as we have built a budget last year, working on it this year. And next year, we're trying to take that budget to the next degree of breaking it out by departments. We're doing that with mixers right now. And I'm looking forward to see how that works out. So I think the sky's the limit of where we're heading. And so tell me what are your thoughts, and what is there anything that my vision is different from yours?
No, I think, the working together over the past year has kept our vision pretty aligned. And I'm so very grateful. You mentioned like we were ready to jump in and utilize the tools that you provide to us. I'm so very grateful for you to provide those tools, right? There are a lot of, I'm sure, fractional CFOs that are very consultant based. I don't want to talk about it, I want to do it. So it's great to be handed, really from day one, that cash flow forecast document, that was phenomenal. And just to be able to watch that week over week, those tools have been hyper critical in giving us the clarity that we were looking for. So some of those things, I think that you would agree, we really kind of had to start pretty basic. We didn't have a proper budget. We didn't have cash flow forecasting. We really had to work at some of those more fundamental finance documents and tools. But I think that after a year, we've got those under control. We're moving forward, and I'm very much looking forward to digging in a little deeper into the data as far as all of the individual department costs and profitability. So, like you said, I think we're on the right trajectory. I think our vision is aligned, and I think that we've got really great things ahead.
Thank you both. I have a few observations and questions as I've been listening. And you mentioned kind of the fundamentals. Actually, there's a lot that I'm really curious about with you. But Joe, are there any like data points that you really like, or numbers you really like, or KPIs you really like, where it's like, you know what, a year ago it was this and now it's this, or it's trending here? Or has it been more about, we've kind of been level setting, we've kind of been getting the fundamentals nailed down so that now we're ready to sort of have that perspective of where do we want to go from here to there? Is there a few specific things that you're really excited about where it's gone?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting you bring that up, because when I first came on site, and as we were talking about the cash forecast as an example, and we had looked at what they have in the bank, what do they have in accounts payable, what do they have in accounts receivables, is there any issues with respect to collections, is there any issues with respect to paying their vendors, where are they at, let's put everything on paper with respect to their cash and what they have in the bank. At the time, what they had in the bank was probably about $200,000 a week in cash. She's now trending every single week $750,000. So the growth of cash has been astronomical. And the fact that she's able to maintain it week after week after week is just, to me, I love seeing it. I love waiting. I get it every Monday, and I love waiting to see what that's going to look like, to see is it staying that consistent, and is it staying that solid and that strong? And it has. Week after week, it's staying that solid. It's projecting out to be that solid. Literally, Ashley, I think for the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're showing the same. Nothing is changing, which means that the collections, people are calling and collecting the money as they need it. They're making sure that it's not a problem. Somebody's waiting 90 days to pay. They're paying in 30. Okay, they're getting the collections as they need them. They're paying their vendors as they need to. They're not having any issues with respect to cash fluctuating one way or another. We are truly understanding where their payroll is, what needs to be paid. Ashley and I have conversations all the time with respect to Should we restructure the pay? Should we restructure this commission base versus this pay? Those are the types of things that I love having those conversations with her, because it's kept her cash that solid. And so to pick out one thing, it's that. That's the one area I absolutely love to see.
And I think it's worth noting. I'm sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say cash flow. That's a good one
Yep.
to have the big shining green light on. But Ashley, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention that I think it's worth noting that in maintaining that amount of cash over time, we have also paid in cash for about $1 million in equipment, and we've doubled down on paying our loan. So it's like we've maintained that amount of cash while also reinvesting in the company, which is pretty awesome.
It's really awesome. And do you attribute that, I guess, Ashley, to the levers being better sensibility about invoicing and billing, better sensibility about our vendor relationships and pay? Like, has it been these sort of, I want to say, obvious levers that once you get a handle on those and which buttons to push, it's kind of settled into, oh, and this is the formula to our cash flow? Has it been that elegant?
Elegance a choice, but yeah, I mean, I think that really putting in like the basics, right, the fundamentals has been transformative. But the other thing too is just the clarity, like apart from, I mean, some of it's timing, right? So some of it's timing around accounts receivable and projects that went out the door. There's no denying that. But also I would argue that in the position of using the cash we have to reinvest in the company, I can't honestly say I would have ever been comfortable doing that without Joe's help, because I didn't have the clarity. I couldn't see 8 weeks in the future that I was going to still maintain that amount of cash, so certainly that has been a benefit of that lever, if you will.
Ashley, did you know when it finally came up at Vistage, like, you know what, this is some assistance that you were getting, guidance that we think that you need? Had you known that somewhere in your mind for a long time and just had been slow to take action on it? Or was it revealing itself to be a problem for you? Like, what was the thing behind the thing that made you say, yeah, this is something for us?
So I think on some level, I've really known. So I purchased the company about, I guess, 6 years ago almost. And the financials have always bothered me. We have like big swings in profitability what we did from things that were happening that, everybody was just sort of like, it's fine. It'll come back around. And I'm not okay with that. So I had been talking about that with my Vistage group. And I really didn't, like I said, I explored some different avenues. I looked at having like an in-house person. I looked at a couple of different fractional organizations. But it really was that day in my Vistage that somebody was like, it was, like I said, it was the day that Nelson got on the phone. My Vistage chair was like, nope, we're going to deal with this right now. He put me on the phone with him. And I guess the rest is history, as they say.
It's interesting because I don't know how many times this has come up in conversations like this with a sort of what I consider an exceptional leader, which is a sense of, I want to say, vulnerability, where it's maybe self-awareness is the better phrase, where and it you all brought it up, like, and I was thinking about the Incredible Hulk, like, you wouldn't like me angry. You were talking about mean girls. But it's implied that it's an issue that we kind of are, I don't know, there's a lack of transparency that is just epidemic in general, or we're fragile, or we're afraid to offend, or we're afraid to step on toes. And actually, that you kind of had this approach of, well, first of all, I'm going to get the answers I need. I don't know what kind of help I need. I'm going to need that help. And then, Joe, as you said, like there's you go into an organization sometimes where it's like, no, this is our business. We know everything. Your job is to get to know how we like to do things. There's a problem in general where we simply don't get the help we could be getting because we won't get out of our own way. And Ashley, I feel like that's not how you roll. And how has that sort of leadership sensibility, as you've had the last 6 years now with the company, how has that informed the way that you lead the company and your relationship with Joe? Just kind of this no holds barred, like, no, I need Mean Joe right now because I know what I need. This lack of trepidation, how has that served you, do you think?
I think it served me very well. So just a quick piece of background information. I own an original equipment manufacturing company. I am not a machinist. I am not an engineer. I am not a financial guru, right? So I walked into this knowing I didn't know everything and I would have to learn from the ground up. And I've always presented that myself that way to Joe, to you, to my employees. You know, you're walking into a building that's predominantly men. And they've all been here for the last 45 years. You know, I can't walk in and act like I know everything because that's just one, not true, and two, like never going to gain credibility with anybody. So I think just from day one, taking that approach and just learning from the people around me, learning from Joe, I think that it has really, it's actually built me a ton of credibility with the people that I work with. And yeah, I think it's served me very well. I'm really, I work well with my team. It took a minute to get there, but yeah, I think it's been a good approach. It's worked well for me.
I mean, what a thing to come into. I mean, a lesson for all of us, everyone, to have kind of a learning mindset rather than a teaching or knowing mindset can really serve us well. Joe, I was really glad to have you brought up the Thought Collective, this ability to leverage the genius of all of us, of all of ProCFO Partners, and how helpful that's been. Do you have a point or two that are specific? Like, this was a thing that came up and I was really glad that I got this answer or whatever. And actually, it feels like you understood the impact of that. Joe, I'm wondering what were one or two of those more impactful things?
A couple of things that for me, as I brought up a little bit before with respect to her office staff, or even with respect to her leadership team. And you brought up the Thought Collective side of it. And one of the things, if I had to pick out maybe one area within that, is last November timeframe, whatever, when we were looking at the budgets and trying to put it together for the first time. And I went back on site, and we worked in the conference room, the leadership team, Ashley, myself, and we really threw a ton of information on the board with the team to say, okay, here's your history. Now, what do you think this is going to do moving forward? And how much are you willing to challenge yourselves? And that was something that I do like to do as a person. I like to challenge myself as much as I like to challenge others. So with respect to the whole Mean Joe, the Mean Joe is coming in and say, people need to be challenged. If we like to live with status quo and the comfort of where we're at, you're not going to grow. You're not going to get any better. We need to be able to be cognizant enough of ourselves, where our weaknesses are, and how can we get past them and challenge ourselves as much as challenge others. So I always feel like if I'm going to challenge myself, I'm going to challenge you right along with me. What I loved was when we went through that exercise the end of last year, that entire team was willing to challenge themselves. Mm-hmm. That entire team did not shy away from saying, no, we can't do that. No, we won't be able to. No, we can't control ourselves. That we have this expense. It's going to always come up. No, Ashley, we can't do this. This is the way we have to do it. Not one of those people in that room did that. Every person in that room, and I think Ashley will test this, every person in that room was willing to say, you know what? I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I think we can. And I love that type of an answer. Somebody says, I don't know how, but I think we can. That's the best answer you can get out of anybody, saying, I'm a little afraid. I'm afraid of what might happen, but I'm willing to try. You can't beat that. And when an organization has that level of mentality, the sky's the limit for where they can be. So if that's answering a question, that's kind of that was kind of that eye opener for me to see really that challenge thrown at them and not one person shying away from the challenge.
Actually, it says a lot about the culture you're cultivating over there. Would you, Ashley, recommend ProCFO Partners to others?
I would, absolutely. And I think what speaks volumes to me is honestly, like we already talked about, I didn't really understand or feel like I was getting what I was paying for at the beginning of the relationship. And again, the response was not defensive. It was not argumentative. It was simply, okay, what do you need and how do we get there? And I think an organization like that that's going to work with you and get you what you need is fantastic. I mean, you can't get any better than that. So
I'm so glad you brought that back up, because when you shared it originally, you said maybe there's just stuff I didn't know, But I really like, and it's no surprise if you get to know Nelson, you're getting to know a good one. But it's no surprise that when you reached out, Nelson turned it into a dialogue. It's very easy to get defensive. It's very easy to do the other thing and just be like, okay, Joe, somebody's unhappy, do this right now, rather than to say, well, there's more to it than this or this or this. Let's talk about it and look at the way that it's positively impacted, the whole engagement in your relationship just by, again, having transparent conversations, not being afraid to talk about the thing that needs to be talked about. For me, that's a big, I guess, beacon of where we've been in this conversation.
Yeah, and something, I don't know if this is unique to ProCFO necessarily, but it is nice also that they have touch points with, I don't really recall, Daniela?
Yes.
And I don't recall her position title, but if you are given the opportunity to, I believe it was like a monthly conversation and then it eventually became quarterly, but to talk to a third party and be honest about your experience. And again, with the intent of, if you're not getting what you need and what you expected, how do we pivot and give you that? So again, I appreciated the opportunity to give that feedback and then to better the relationship because of it.
Ashley Miller is the owner at Abbottstown Industries. She is at abbind.com. Joe Shake is at ProCFOPartners.com. Ashley, thank you so much for sharing, your story with us. And I always say, come back. I'd love to know what's going on a year from now, or 2 years from now. Let's see how this is going. And so I hope that we can do that. I hope we can come back and see what's changed and how that cash flow has even gotten, more impressive, and all the things you guys are working on. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the time you both have spent with us today.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.